Well, thank you. Thanks for inviting me and thanks for joining us for this lecture within the Arqus scheme. I'm Christian Pentzold. I am a chair for media and communications here at Leipzig. And together with my colleague, Tom Devon from Hebrew University, who is also with us, will also be here for the Q&A session. I am happy to talk about our work on what we call AI resurrections. So what I'm offering you is a perspective coming from communications and media, thinking about particular uses and areas of exploration and experimentation along the possibilities opened to us through generative AI. And I'm saying this, when being asked about the topic, right, what I would like to present, this is work that has been keeping us busy for at least the past 2 years now. But I feel like, speaking from Leipzig, I feel like they become particularly pertinent as of today. Yesterday, this academic community and the city was experiencing a moment of shock and turmoil given these events happening close to our campus that bring us particularly to the what we call the existential dimension of life and death and the role media and now AI tools play within them. So AI is regarded as strumming my pain with his fingers, as widely a transformative force, reshaping our understanding both of life and death. One particularly intriguing and experimental frontier, we argue, is its ability to reimagine and recreate deceased beings, both human and animal. In our talk, we take issue with this nascent area of AI application situated what we call the threshold of existence. And here, you might get the soundscape as well. So we hear quite a popular song in the 90s, but now sung by Whitney Houston, the late Whitney Houston, who never in her life ever sang this song. But now she's recreated for us her voice and giving us this performance. And we will come back to cases like this during the talk. So what do we mean by AI resurrections? We might define them as the way effigies, like the presence of a being and the voices become virtually alive. And here we play with the English notion of virtually as something that is not physically in a sense, but also something that is as almost as. So lifelike, as if something is still alive or alive again, thanks to the generative power of AI fed with large troves of digital born and digitized data of dead beings. So the overall environment where we live in and in which we communicate is already generating so much data about us, and not only about us as we are, but also about our feelings, about our ideas and opinions, that offers these troves of data that can now be harvested within generative AI models to recreate human beings or any other living being around. And there are a couple of efforts that we see that have been emerging and popping up over the past couple of years. Indeed, there's research on what we call TANA bots or grief bots that are usually working in a communicative written mode and try to emulate the presence of a particular person because they are trained on a particular person's data. We have holographic avatars living in virtual reality, clones, animated images, and also a couple of how they call themselves afterlife service providers. When we look at basically the technological backbone of AI resurrections, so what we have usually a formula, things that are cooked together, which is usually about videos and photos and audio recordings of the deceased. We have some element of audio processing, usually recreating the distinctive voice of the deceased, often driven by speech synthesis based on machine learning and natural language processing. We have text processing, of course, and AI-driven synthesis, usually to create chatbots or any kind of communicative companion or avatar. We have elements and experimentations with holography and virtual reality technologies, and we also have animation and motion capture. So the plethora of media production that is now based or driven and powered by AI is offering itself, is lending itself to the use for AI resurrections. And we came to this topic through like quite different angles, coming from like an Israeli and from a German background. And we were basically stumbling upon these things happening on our phones, on TikTok and on Instagram, where you might also encounter like dead people that we might never have met, that have not been part of our biography, that are then brought back in small clips that might be entertaining or more political toned. And so looking at this and being confronted with this field of experimentation, we were asking ourselves, what are these modes of employing AI to kind of integrate the deceased back into society? And once following this question, we were also asking ourselves, what purposes do they serve? So what is the effort behind bringing them back to life? Or this is not completely correct, bringing them back to something lifelike. So I'm speaking from a media and communications perspective, and Tom is also a media communication scholar. And well, overall, for us, this is intriguing for a couple of reasons. Because when we look back at the history of media, even the notion of a medium must not be connected to technology. So when we look back in the 19th century, a medium could be a member of a seance, like guiding others, being something in between other things. So in a very basic definition, right, the media always mediate between the non-present. I mean, usually expectations are that the non-present are just not present, but they are alive. Now, with AI resurrections, basically the non-present are even not present in a physical sense anymore. They are, and here we draw on a Swedish scholar and colleague, Amanda Lagerqvist. She calls them existential media. Existential media, she argues, where significance becomes most evident in limit situations of loss and grief and reminiscence. Just to give you an example, are photographs. So photographs of people that have left us, that then become, we are now surrounded by like millions of photographs, right? But they become a particular significance once they point us to people not around anymore. So they become like a representative, a stand-in for something that we have lost connection. And this is what she points us to with her notion of existential media. She says media are all around us, particularly in these situations. They become so important for us in maintaining connections or re-establishing them. So the essence of mediation is in fact to connect those that are non-present. And this holds true for any kind of medium. So, one of our like our household names of media scholars, John Durham Peters, who wrote that media are prime devices in the human quest to conserve as much of the presence of others as possible. And if we look at like the innovations in media, if we just look back at the 19th century, so there was a sea change once it was possible not only to draw a picture of a person, but to take a photo of a person and kind of conserving like the essence of that person. And even more so when it was possible to conserve the voice of a person. And even more so when it was possible to conserve the movements of a person with film, for instance. So we have these media innovations that were more and more bringing us into a position of the phantasm of the living, as he writes. So media are existential because they are present in extraordinary transformative or traumatic events and crisis. And we see this back and forth in time once we encounter or confronted with exactly these situations, and definitely situations of loss and grief qualify for that. So with that in mind, how would we think about, or what would we offer to think about AI resurrections? So following Tal Morse, we might argue that these are quite different creatures or recreations, since they are able to initiate interaction. This is something quite different from any other. I mean, there is tons of research on how the web is used for mourning practices, like for instance, writing to the dead. But usually the dead are not responding. In that case, with the case of AI resurrections, they are brought back into an interactive relationship and communicative relationship with the living. So they shift from being mere subjects of communication to actively engaging with us while speaking in their own recreated voices. And with generative AI, this is a real step in terms of transformation, since this is not about pre-recorded sequences of what people said, right? I mean, we have this just pointing you to all these efforts of the Shoah Foundation in trying to preserve as much of eyewitness accounts as possible, and making them available for future generations. These AI avatars, they are speaking words and formulating sentences that in that sense have never been spoken by the very person. So the aim is, we might say, to transcend the juncture by retaining the dead in an approachable and communicative free presence. So they are kept as, we might say, active counterparts within social relations and interactions. And this is, at least to me, this is quite mind-boggling. So I will say, I was pointing you to these services, and if you kind of browse the web, you find a couple of them out there. Like, I give you just the example of Elixir AI, who on their website write, "We live in new times, we can now live better, live forever. Empower your data, be dynamic, be relevant, be you," which is basically a service that is offering that you can basically, they collect all the data that you have or generate for them, and then they help you to be around even after your own death. So this entire research I'm talking about is embedded in a broader conceptual and theoretical work that thinks about what are the characteristics and dimensions of what have others called a post-mortal society. It is post-mortal, some argue, since the 1970s, because it finds itself in a constant state of denial of death. So the death is kind of pushed out of our sight and of our experiential reality on the one hand, but also in hyper awareness of death. So the news are full of death on the one hand, but also it becomes quite difficult to face it. So it is omnipresent, but also remains highly problematic in today's society. And next to that form of paradoxical denial and awareness, there has been a bunch of mushrooming innovations in what has been dubbed TANA technologies. And they are not only about media. I mean, we have like digital tools, but also modular practices and biohacking practices in terms of kind of extending your lifespan and perhaps even kind of getting away with it and trying to circumvent what is as of now a necessity that is kind of part and parcel of life. So it's not just about media, but mainly about media, of digital tools now to create digital legacies, preserving memories, fostering connections in between the loved ones across what Arqus called the existential boundaries. And lately, we see a new shift towards AI here. So if we kind of try to turn this into a conceptual understanding, it might not be, it definitely is not about immortality, particularly not in any kind of philosophical or even religious sense. It is more about practices of immortalization that seek not spiritual means, but technological means to keep the dead in society in order to remain relationships and continue bonds by keeping open ways of communication and interaction, even though they are lifelike or almost or virtual, as we call them. So in here, I'm almost ending my conceptual part, but this is the last thing I offer to you, is what Kopelman and Frosch call the algorithmic as if. So it is as if, it is not perhaps life as if like existing, present, communicative, that is kind of matched towards anything that we might connect to something that is really living and really alive. So what did we do to kind of take stock? And I must say, and I must admit that this is a very momentary taking stock, right? As of now, I think we have more than 75 cases. And to be honest, I mean, as soon as I open the phone, I encounter something that is, again, kind of turning us into a state of facing, confronting, interacting with AI resurrections. So how did we try to take stock? We were looking at media reports, social media discussions also. We stumbled across platforms and different languages in trying to get sometimes an echo of cases, but also sometimes websites and like presentations and accounts that were run by projects trying to establish a new form of AI resurrection and offering them to followers and users. We were using a bunch of different keywords to kind of trying to map this emerging field. And then we were using screenshots and screen captures, as well as all kinds of available material to get our heads around what was happening there with this use of technology and the aim to kind of represencing the dead. And we basically came up with 3 different modes. So one mode of how AI resurrections were used, and we tried to cluster them. And so one of these 3 modes or clusters that we were establishing, we called spectacularization. What does that mean? Basically, they are spectacular in the sense that the AI effigies, these resurrections, are put back on stage and presented to an audience. So there is a moment of awe happening here, or at least there is a hope for kind of installing some element of awe and surprise, perhaps about like that this can happen at all, but also about the power of AI of doing so. So there are now a couple of efforts regarding mega events that are live in the sense that, it is presented, you're part of the happening, you're part of the performance, where iconic figures of the past are brought back. So this is an example. There has even been a tour by the late Maria Callas that has now been kind of brought back to stage to perform arias she sang, but also arias she didn't sing. So she can be made to sing whatever you want, which already alludes to a couple of ethical and legal questions that are also pertinent once we think about AI resurrections. Then there are also we clustered them as part of spectacularization. There are video clips for special occasions, like for instance, national holidays, when important figures from the past are returning and with messages for the living, or also like just, seeing someone walking and talking that definitely we only know from documents and paintings. And then a third element that has been part of the entertainment production are movie teasers and even movies films, but also songs that feature resurrected icons and stars from the past that are now kind of brought back to us. So the second case, or the second category, was much broader in scope, and we called it sociopoliticization. It usually centers on the application of generative AI tools in social and political advocacy. So across various contexts, the voices and the images of individuals who have become victims in any in any kind are woven into audiovisual narratives. So there is one set of cases we found were about domestic violence, and the victims of femicides, for instance, were coming back with usually a message for the living. So they were not just giving testimony to their turmoil, but also they had something to say. And of course, these were words these people might have subscribed to, right? But they were never uttered in that way. So they were kind of propped up, brought back again with something that usually is kind of mobilized or takes its effort and power from their terrible fate. The second was and is war commemoration, like fallen soldiers being brought back in a variety of online projects, like, for instance, the recent Israeli-Hamas conflict, where they are brought back and then they have something to say about messages of peace or of war. Then we have a couple of projects that were about individuals who have passed away for avoidable health reasons and accidents. Again, avoidable in the sense of the message is usually about to take precautions to warn the living or prepare them in relaying any kind of message that should help of kind of helping them not to follow the same destiny and avenue these people went to. Like they were usually precautionary in character or preemptive. So the fourth, and there this example, the short line comes from, is usually about social injustices. People, both death is caused by social wrongs. Like, for instance, here we all have all victims by gun crimes in the US that then come back again with a message for us as the living, or racism. There were also a couple of projects. And fifth, there is experimentation happening with Holocaust memorials. So, I mean, this kind of connects to massive efforts that have a long trajectory of preserving the memory, the eyewitness accounts of Holocaust victims. But there is something intriguing happening here, as in all these cases. But I might use this one to tease it out. Is that what we get? I mean, what we now have is we have like really hundreds and thousands of accounts being preserved by different museums and foundations of victims of the Shoah. But what happens when we use this data that is available already in digital form and feed them into LLMs? The outcome of this is something that we might call a synthetic witnessing account, which is not wrong in the sense, but it is highly fabricated. I mean, the overall business of having an eyewitness account or having a witness account is that this person has been at a historical moment been present and is giving an account that is testified and verified by this person being present and seeing or being part of, being involved in something. And this is something that can't apply to these synthetic witnessing accounts in the same way. So we have to kind of rethink our categories of historic truth and veracity and authenticity once it comes to our encounters with these new forms of AI resurrections. There is a third mode, which we have called mundanization. And again, this is quite broad, and it speaks to all uses that are very much more tailored to personal remembrance and commemoration happening within family contexts or contexts of friends and acquaintances, where there usually was an intimate relationship in between people where at least one part has left the society of the living. And there are a couple of efforts, again, businesses also offering their services here, like, for instance, hyper-realistic interactions made possible by the exploitation of data donated by people that were either while still around, or the data that is available from deceased people. We have platforms like one is called JOF, UOF, You Only Virtual, that basically promises to kind of recreate you from everything that they have about you, kind of we might call it a virtual double or a digital double of you. Then there is like William Shatner here of Starship Enterprise fame. He's kind of giving a testimony, he's kind of part of an ad of pre-recorded videos. And the point is, it's not just about these like 2,000 hours of pre-recorded video, it is what is made of it. So it's just, the material that feeds into that promises a powerful LLM created resurrection. And we also have like businesses like Eternal Me or Forever Identity. These are two names that are using AI to digital legacies. So these are the three different fields. So, we have spectacularization, we have sociopoliticization, and we have mundanization we call them modes of AI resurrections. I was already kind of alluding to the ethical and the legal questions that come with that. And a term Tom and I were thinking about and are playing with is what we call spectral labor, or if you want, ghost labor. I know this is highly metaphorical speaking, but the point is, we emphasize the labor element here. I know that, usually only the living are laboring, and at one point the labor shall stop. But there we see them, I was saying, exploited, being turned back again to participate in social interactions. And these interactions can evolve over time. They are dynamic, and they may be created for other purposes than just supporting the mourners when we look at these forms of mundanization that have a strong focus on mourning and grief practices. And there, as I was saying, they are pointing to ethical and economic concerns because, as of now, there is an absence of consent usually. We have a few cases where people were, as part of their afterlife preparations, were donating the data and giving them away within like a certain terms of service and operation. Usually this happens without the consent of the dead, and also legal frameworks to govern what is, as of now, usually an unauthorized composition of remains. So when we look broadly on these three different modes, we find four different ways or ways of exploitation and usage that kind of run across these three different modes. So one we might call a nostalgia and tribute. So of course we see cases where it's about honoring the legacy of deceased icons and bringing them back and celebrating them. Perhaps even allowing fans to kind of connect in performances that they have not managed to kind of experience while this artist was still present. Like think of Amy Winehouse, for instance, now giving a concert, or we see a couple of efforts like with people like Michael Jackson, for instance, coming back and performing. This connects closely to the second, which is entertainment. And this can be even broader than just a nostalgia and tribute. It is producing something that is unique or mesmerizing, and perhaps at least in two ways, right? Mesmerizing and unique in the sense of, okay, this is an encounter that we never had before with this person, but also you are becoming witness to the power of AI. So it's also a display of what generative AI tools can actually do. So this connects to the third, which we call an innovation showcase. So of course they are a test case for the power of cutting edge AI and its capabilities of I don't feel like it's not just tricking people into believing. I think this is not the point. I think people are they dwell happily in the state of as if. Perhaps even like this moment of entertainment or acquaintance exactly grows in this state of as if, and that you happily embrace it and see its possibilities. And fourth, there's of course an element of economic gain. So these are not just philanthropic businesses. They are often carried by also financial hopes in boosting ticket sales and viewership. And this brings us to two points I would like to end with that are also critical. So particularly when we focus on spectacularization, we see that these restage icons become part and driver and catalyst of economic activities with effects for the living. So, they are in the overall share of attention and available money to spend. The dead are now present and around again and ask for attention and perhaps even ticket sales. So we are celebrating the icon, but we might also celebrate the power of AI when we look at how the spectacle is exploited. And second, and I think this leaves us with something that keeps us busy thinking, is how they are used to mobilize for social political quests. So we all see third parties involved that might have been part already of the existence and reality of the deceased or not, that are using these kind of posthumous testimonies for their purposes. Because, one assumption would be that with their death, they have provided a seal that is ensuring that the message of the deceased endures, harnessing their experiences into lasting reminders of the human cost of, for instance, injustice and conflict. So we're not saying these must be necessary bad or countervailing purposes, but they are in a variety of connections to these AI resurrections and their lives. So it usually is about crafting a certain kind of testimony of either violence or premature death and turning them into some kind of call for the living. And of course, again, it raises the question of autonomy, right? Of our ability, of our integrity, of ability to keep safe what is left of us, what is our legacy. And of course, it also broadens the dimension of what we treat and understand as our legacies and the power and the dynamics that might grow from them that have been, as of now, not been explored in that way. So this, and there I offer the last term, Amanda Lagerquist is giving it to us. She calls it liminal media. So liminal media in the sense of there is still so much experimentation on the one hand going on. We are not sure in what kind of way it kind of goes or the avenue it points us to, but all these innovations happen also at the limits of life. So, and with that, I would like to end, is that these AI resurrections, I think this is one of the statements that we make, do not lie outside of the realm of the social. Quite contrary, they are existential and thus irreducible to the conceptions of social life and of personhood. They become part and parcel also of our understanding of life and death. So we should focus more, or we should invest more time and energy in interrogating their function in situations of mourning and commemoration and celebration and spectacle. Thank you very much for your time now and attention. And I guess Tom and definitely I are happy to answer your questions or discuss. And if you would like to take another look, there is a paper out. If you just follow that QR code, it will be guided you to an open access version of it.